Dr. Ethan Cole was closing up his clinic on Terminus Station when she stumbled through the door. It was late, well past when he should have locked up, but he'd learned years ago that the people who most needed help often arrived at the worst times. She was humanoid but clearly not human. Distinctive pointed ears, skin that shifted through muted colors, grayish bronze that Ethan's limited xenobiology training suggested might indicate pain or distress. She wore plain clothes with no identifying markers, the kind of person who blends into frontier station crowds and leaves no impression. And she was badly injured. Deep lacerations across her torso, plasma burns on her shoulder, the kind of wounds that said serious combat rather than random accident. "Help me," she said in accented coalition standard, then collapsed before Ethan could ask any questions. Ethan got her onto the examination table, heavier than she looked, dense muscle and bone structure, and began the critical work of stopping the bleeding and assessing damage. The lacerations were deep but clean, suggesting professional blade work. The plasma burn was serious but treatable. The internal bleeding was the real concern. He worked for 3 hours, using every bit of skill from his medical training and frontier experience. The woman remained unconscious through most of it, which was fortunate because some procedures would have been agonizing with just the local anesthetics his underfunded free clinic could afford. As he worked, Ethan noticed things. Her physiology was similar to several species he knew, but with subtle differences suggesting enhancements or evolutionary specialization. Denser muscle structure, more efficient circulatory system, neural pathways that seemed almost optimized for rapid processing and response. Interesting, but not immediately relevant to keeping her alive. He filed it away and continued treatment. What Ethan couldn't know, was that he was treating Kalistra, Supreme Commander of the Verath Legion, the most feared military force in the galaxy, led by a woman whose personal combat record included single-handedly ending 3 separate sector wars through demonstrations of overwhelming power. She was a legend, a nightmare, the person entire governments moved to avoid or appease. And she was currently unconscious on his examination table while he stitched her wounds with whatever supplies his underfunded clinic had available. Kale woke slowly, her body protesting every movement as whatever pain medications the doctor had used wore off. She assessed her situation with the tactical precision that had kept her alive through decades of combat. She was in a recovery room, clean but clearly under-resourced. A free clinic, she realized, not military medical facility, not corporate hospital. A frontier charity operation for people who couldn't afford proper care. She'd been treated by someone with skill but limited resources, which explained why some of her wounds still ached more than they should. The door opened, and a human man entered, mid-30s, tired eyes that held genuine concern rather than calculated assessment. The doctor who'd saved her life. "You're awake," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Good, how are you feeling?" Kale took stock of her injuries with the clinical detachment of someone used to pain. "Functional. Your work is competent given apparent resource constraints." Ethan raised an eyebrow at the formal assessment. "High praise. You're lucky. Another hour without treatment and you wouldn't have made it. What happened?" Kale considered her options. She could lie, create a cover story, maintain operational security. Or she could tell a truth that wouldn't reveal who she was while being honest about what happened. Ambush. Betrayal. I was caught unprepared. It was the most honest she'd been about anything in years. Admitting vulnerability was alien to her, but this stranger had spent hours keeping her alive. That earned some truth. Over the next days, as Kale recovered in the clinic's sparse but clean recovery room, Ethan treated her like any other patient. He checked her wounds, changed bandages with supplies that were functional if not ideal, monitored for infection. He was professional but kind, the sort of doctor who saw people rather than just injuries. He didn't press for details about who she was or what happened. Didn't try to report her to authorities or extract payment she hadn't offered. Just treated her and left her alone when she needed rest. "You don't ask many questions," Kale observed during one dressing change, watching him work with practiced efficiency. Ethan shrugged. "I run a free clinic on a frontier station. Half my patients are running from something. If you wanted me to know who you are, you'd tell me. If you don't want to tell me, I don't need to know to treat your injuries." This radical acceptance was so foreign to Kale's experience that she almost didn't know how to process it. People always wanted something from Supreme Commander Kalestra: alliance, mercy, favor, fear. This human doctor wanted nothing except to ensure her wounds healed properly. It was unsettling and oddly comforting. As days passed and Kale's injuries healed, something unexpected happened. She started actually talking to Ethan. Not strategic conversation or diplomatic maneuvering, just talking. He asked about her species, genuinely curious about the physiological characteristics he'd noticed during treatment. She explained Varath biology, carefully avoiding details that would reveal her identity, but sharing cultural information she hadn't discussed with anyone in years, because conversations with Supreme Commander Kalestra were always political, never personal. Ethan shared stories about running the clinic, about the desperate and forgotten people who ended up on frontier stations, about choosing this life over lucrative corporate positions because it felt more real, more meaningful, even if it meant constant financial struggle and never having proper supplies. "You're good at this," Kale said, watching him treat another patient, a colonist with a broken arm who couldn't afford proper hospital care. "You could be wealthy practicing medicine elsewhere. Why stay here?" "Because these people need help and no one else is offering it," Ethan said simply. Seems like enough reason. The simplicity of his moral framework was refreshing to Kale, who'd spent decades navigating complex political and military calculations, where every decision affected billions and second-guessing meant death. During one late-night conversation, when pain kept Kale awake and Ethan was finishing paperwork at the nurse's station, she asked, "Do you ever get tired, knowing that no matter how many people you help here, there are millions more suffering elsewhere that you can't reach?" "Every day," Ethan admitted without hesitation. "But getting tired of it doesn't make it less worth doing. You save the people in front of you because they're there, and you hope it matters even if you can't save everyone." Kale was quiet, processing this. She'd spent years commanding forces that shaped galactic politics, wielding power that could end wars or start them. But this human doctor had a form of strength she'd never possessed. The strength to keep helping without needing to control outcomes, to be content with local impact without requiring galaxy-spanning power. It was humbling in ways that battlefield victories never were. A week into Kale's recovery, everything changed. Varath Legion forces arrived at Terminus Station in overwhelming numbers, searching for their missing Supreme Commander. Station security was helpless against the military presence, entire battalions deploying to scan every facility, question every resident. When Varath soldiers entered Ethan's clinic, weapons ready and demanding information about their commander, Ethan was confused until one of them spotted Kale in the recovery room and immediately dropped to one knee. "Supreme Commander Kalestra, we've been searching." Ethan's brain short-circuited. Supreme Commander, the most powerful being in the galaxy. The woman whose tactical genius and personal combat abilities had shaped galactic politics for decades. The legend that entire governments feared. He'd been treating her like a regular patient, calling her by first name, telling her about his day like she was just another person recovering from injuries. Kale, seeing Ethan's shock, dismissed the soldiers with curt orders to secure the perimeter and await her instructions. Once they were gone, she turned to face Ethan's stunned expression. "You're..." Ethan struggled for words. "You're the Supreme Commander. I stitched your wounds with expired antibiotics because they were all I could afford. I put the most feared military leader in the galaxy in a recovery room with a broken air conditioner. Because you treated me like a person who needed help instead of a political entity that required management." Kale interrupted, her skin shifting through colors Ethan had learned meant profound emotion. "Do you know how long it's been since someone saw me that way? Since someone spoke to me without calculating advantage or fearing consequences?" Ethan sat down heavily. "The ambush, that wasn't random. My own command structure," Kale confirmed. "Factions wanting to replace me with someone more amenable to their agenda. They came closer than most." Her ears tilted with what might be wry humor. "Ending up at your clinic was the best tactical mistake I've ever made." She explained that her injuries had forced vulnerability she never permitted. And in that vulnerability, she'd found something she'd lost: the experience of being helped without obligation, cared for without calculation, seen as a person rather than a weapon or political force. "You saved my life," she said. "Not because of who I am, but because it's what you do." That's remarkable. Ethan processed this, so what happens now? "Now I make sure your clinic has the funding and supplies it should have had all along," Kale said firmly. "You'll be able to treat everyone properly, not just with whatever you can scrape together." "I don't want special treatment, because I accidentally helped someone important." "It's not special treatment," Kale interrupted. "It's acknowledgement that what you do matters, and people doing meaningful work shouldn't have to choose between mission and survival. Consider it payment for services rendered, medical care that treated me like a patient rather than a political calculation." Months later, when Ethan's clinic was fully funded and serving the station's poorest residents with actual resources, reporters asked about his connection to Supreme Commander Kalistra. He gave his characteristic honest answer: "I treated an injured patient who needed help. Turns out she was important, but that's not why I helped her. She was someone in pain who walked through my door." That's the only qualification that ever mattered. Kale, when asked about the human doctor who treated her without knowing who she was, said thoughtfully, "Dr. Cole showed me that strength isn't just power or capability. It's choosing to help when help is needed, regardless of who needs it or what you might gain." He saw me as a patient, not a commander. That simple act taught me more about leadership than decades of military service, because they'd learned that vulnerability reveals truths power keeps hidden. That being treated like a regular person is its own gift when you're used to being treated like a weapon. And that, sometimes the strongest thing you can do, is let someone help you without